I cried with my whole heart, hear me. O Lord, I will keep thy statutes. I cried with my whole heart, hear me. O Lord, I will keep thy statutes. I cried unto thee, save me, and I shall keep thy testimonies. I prevented the dawning of the morning. I cried, I hoped in thy word. Mine eyes prevent. I cried with my whole heart, hear me. O Lord, I will keep thy statutes. I cried unto thee, save me, and I shall keep thy testimonies. I prevented the dawning of the morning. I cried, I hoped in thy word. Mine eyes prevent. I cried with my whole heart, hear me.
It's the loop 50 times. Hello, welcome and good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Oh boy, this is the morning that almost didn't make it. So sometimes having this every single day tests the limits of my abilities, and so we're an hour late because I stayed up 2 hours longer than I normally do, and the alarm clock had no effect on me when I lay there in my slumber. I use a very quiet alarm so I don't wake everyone up, because that's not the point of my clock, is to wake just me up. So let's move past that and go on to the next thing. It makes me feel almost laughably giddy. Okay. Not only did I oversleep, but I had no time to think about what we were doing today. Let's take the top off the coffee and get right to the good stuff. There we go. But never fear, this is one of my favorite little passages. I just always love this passage. But whereunto shall I liken this generation? It is likened to children sitting in the markets and calling to their fellows. You're like a bunch of children and saying, we have piped unto you, and ye have not danced. We have mourned unto you, and ye have not lamented. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he hath a devil. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, behold, behold, a man gluttonous, and a winebibber, a friend of publicans and sinners. But wisdom is justified of her children. You know, there is a double play on the idea of children here, obviously. And the analogy is pretty transparent, you know. We've played music, but you didn't dance for you know. In other words, John was neither eating and drinking, and they didn't like him, and Jesus came eating and drinking, and they didn't like him. They didn't like anything that would upset the established order. You know, and people take this attitude generally towards God, like, I prayed to you and you didn't answer what I wanted. People are, you know, we have this idea of like dancing to the tune of something. They don't say like, well, I played a tune and you wouldn't dance. And it comes from this, I have no doubt, because I don't any reference after Jesus is a reference to Jesus. Meaning someone comes up with saying, you know, dance to the tune of another piper or something like that. They use that analogy. It's referring back to this version of the story. And, you know, and I'm not saying that he invented this thought. It's just that in our culture, all references point back to this, to the Lord Jesus. And so I'm just all of a sudden aware of all the. That's probably okay. Just don't want to. I don't want to have anything. That didn't. Did I actually? Okay, I do not want that up. All right. You know what? Just for safety, let's just close that. There we go. Yeah, because I don't have the ability to check the chat right now. I closed that window because I noticed I was getting a bad rate on my what do you call it? My connection, my internet connection. Because there's a little red light and it's on all the time, the whole time today. So we don't want to be like children, you know, looking to God and expecting Him to, like, well, we played a tune and you didn't do what we expected. And, you know, that is very frequently the case with tradition and with human beings in general. They expect everything to come to them how they demand it. You know, so like you go to a restaurant, you place an order, and you expect them to come, and it's, you know, we have so many expectations like that. It's like we say we want something, and we expect that thing to come. Like they're our servants, or like they're childhood playmates. You know, it's like we were playing funeral, and we mourned, and therefore, but you didn't play along. They were playing high religious holy men. And John didn't play it right, and neither did Jesus. You know, they didn't play their game. And people always want you to play their game. They want you to participate in their game. You know, there's interesting things in the world. People who study and try to understand the nature of reality. And they talk about life in terms of game theory. You know, like that you play a game. The life is like a series of games. This is why it's important for children to play. This is why boys are just drawn to games, because boys have to participate in games, at least in most of their life. Most of history, men have had to engage in this gameplay, and it's so that's why it's just men are just drawn to games. It's part of our nature. We're competitive. We like games, and life is like a game. You have to. There are rules. You know what I mean? We have to. When I interact with another person, it's like a game, and that there are certain rules, and we have to, you know, navigate this sort of interaction we have with each other. We gotta navigate it thoughtfully and according to, if someone starts violating the rules of the game, you know, we immediately are very offended at it. You know, rule breaking is very offensive. You know, it's like if you're talking with someone and they suddenly punch you in the face, they violated the rule of the game. You know, and that's how these things are kind of looked at. And so the Pharisees had a rule in their game, like okay, well, you know, you've got to play along this way. This is how you got to be. You got to be, you know, wear a long robe. You got to do this, that, the other. And John the Baptist there comes and he starts going in the wilderness and wearing camel's hair, and he's not playing according to their game, and they find it offensive. Because even if you're running a bad game, if people won't play along, like, you know, if the house is dirty, so to speak, if the house, meaning that the people running, if people who have power over the rules of the game are running an unfair game, they will be offended even when someone breaks their corrupt rules. And so they had, you know, and a lot of that is still, I mean, I've been the victim of it, where I walked in, you know, I talk about when I went into churches where, like, I didn't realize the game was you had to wear a suit, and I got let's say blowback from minorities. You know what I mean? A lot of good people were in that place when I was there. I have nothing bad to say about all of them, but there are some people for whom the game was, if you're not wearing the suit, you know, you're you're the subject of ridicule. And that was very shocking to me because I wasn't prepared for it. No one told me the rules ahead of time. And so they're playing this on Jesus, like, hey, you know, they didn't like his behavior. They were playing some sort of game where it's like, it became ultimately a game because it really wasn't about his eating and drinking or John's austerity. It was about, if you're not part of our club, you can't be a man of God. If you're not in on our corrupt, you know, little hierarchy we've got going. You know, you know, because there's the hierarchy of Pharisees and they're all together. And just like, I don't like picking on Catholics, and I'm not going to pick on Catholics per se, but the Catholic Church is like this hierarchy, and they want you to sort of engage in it. Oddly enough, you can have a lot of really off-the-wall views doctrinally if you're a Catholic, because their really biggest thing, I think, is to belong, like, to their church. If you're a part of the Catholic Church, you sort of are playing the game, and you have a say, and you have a voice. But and they have their little hierarchy going up to the Pope, and if you're in it, then you're part. You know, then that's good. But if you're not, that's not. You know, they've become very enlightened about, versus like, you know, 300, 400, 500 years ago when it was this when they were clinging to this power they had. You know, they're much more enlightened. You know, they're not going to despise you, but there's still this sort of like, be part of it. Be part of the game. Play the game with us. And Jesus had none of it. He wasn't going to play their game. He was playing the game of all people. And you see how he won. I mean, Jesus won the game. If I be lifted up, I will draw all men to me. He was playing a game where his purpose was to draw people from everywhere, from, you know, male, female, Jews, Greeks. He drew people from every walk of life to him. It became the biggest religion in the world. And they talk about Islam, but Islam is growing currently through having lots of babies. Without the sword, they have a little trouble spreading their gospel. They don't have a gospel. Well, their gospel. I don't know much about Islam, and I shouldn't talk about it because I don't know. I don't like to talk about things I'm ignorant of. You know what I mean? Plus, they get angry and they cut off your head, and I don't want that to happen. But from what I understand, you know, as far as the fastest growing, I've never been. I don't like those kind of measuring contests where you're saying like, well, whatever grows the fastest is the best. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that Jesus, in what he set out to accomplish, he did accomplish, and that the God, you know, it went from being this very small movement in Palestine or in Israel to being this worldwide phenomenon, taking over the very empire that ruled over it, and then eventually spreading to the world. And even now, Christianity is spreading the fastest in China. You know, a place where they enforced atheism beginning almost 60 years ago, let's say it like that. I know the 50s was when China was really hopping as far as Mao and all that. Was it 50s, 60s? Whatever. It was the post-war period. And they've had enforced atheism for decades and decades, and somehow in the midst of all that, you know, state enforced atheism, where the church, quote unquote, and the state were united, and still the Christianity is growing like wildfire among a third of the world's population over there, or they're not a third, a sixth, something like that. So you know, people try to play games, and You don't have to play their games. There are some, there are all kinds of different games you can play in life that, for good or evil. Oh boy. Oh, well, too late. I was trying to mute it, but I was like, I gotta sneeze. Some tingles down my fingers. Much better. Okay. We wanted you to play our game, but you wouldn't play with us. As if, like I said, you don't have to play the games that men... I've made my entire life around that concept, honestly, by refusing to play games I didn't like. If I don't like the rules of your game, I'm not playing. You don't have to play their games. Like, I've often commented, and if I haven't often commented, I should comment more often. I didn't send my children to school. I find school to be a bad idea. Children should interact with each other, but the idea that you should put all the children of the same age together in a group and just, treat them like fish, like a creature that is many deviations different than human. The idea that, we should school them like this. We should take all the 7-year-olds and stick them in a classroom together with one adult, and that's how a child should be educated optimally. I was willing to sacrifice. To me, it's like, I can never drive a new car. I can live in I can go someplace where my income is enough to sustain us. We'll just buy a small house. We'll move into the middle of nowhere. Fortunately, I was on the early edge of working from home as far as remote work and stuff. In the industry I was originally working in, and now what I'm doing. You got to do what is necessary. You don't have to play the game that they tell you must play. You don't have to... Sorry about that awful sound. Hold on. Said I was up much later last night than I wanted to be, and I'm still feeling it. So this passage has been fairly well explained. I have this weird thing. I just don't want to move on. Wisdom is justified over children. I mean, an object or a decision is judged wise based on what follows. If you do something wise, the outcome will display that. I remember I'm not gonna throw family members under the bus, but one of the things is I raise my kids a certain way, and I think that, and it's not about them being my children, it's about the results of my upbringing, that they, as adults, especially as young adults, they still admire me, and they still, and they affirm that the way I raised them was good. And, and so the wisdom of my decisions is justified by their attitude about them. The outcome it's not exactly the ends justify the means, but it's sort of like the ends justify the means. It's not so much that the ends justify the means, but the ends at least can not so much justify, but rather prove effectual the means. Meaning, if you get the outcome you were setting out to get, it shows that you wisely attempted to get what you got. Now, it may not be ethical You know, it's not an ethical statement like the ends justify the means. Meaning, well, if you want to get, you know, like I said, some people will complain about stupid people. They shouldn't breed, and so getting rid of stupidity, the you know, death camps would justify that, I suppose. You know, when people start complaining about, I can't stand all the stupid people, I can't. I just think to myself, it's like, what are you gonna kill them all? That's why I was talking about, like, the whole whosoever shall say thou fool is in danger of the fire of hell, because that's where that starts. It's like, you're like, these fools, they don't hear the truth. These fools, these stupid people, they're just so stupid. How do you fix stupid? How do you fix it? If I don't have the you know, like, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm not. There are guys far more brainier than I am. That is for certain. There's no false humility there. I know that for a fact. Don't write me saying nice things that aren't true. You know, I'm not the smartest guy. I know it. Like, if I got a blind spot, you know, if I'm doing something, and God knows I've done stupid things, I've been engaged in stupid things. And some of them are even due to intelligence. You know what I mean? Well, they're not due to intelligence. No. They're due to, like I'm a perfectionist. And that may be a byproduct of the intelligence. Seeing a lot of details can lead to obsession with details. So I can stupidly obsess over details that don't matter, because I'm just so focused on details. There's a lot of ways in which, despite being intelligent, I can behave stupidly. I'm not stupid, but you could look at my actions and say, "What? How can a smart guy do so many stupid things?" I don't know. You know? Well, how do you fix it? I try to think about it. Try to be mindful of it. You know, try to think, okay, how can we avoid this problem? You know, how can I, you know, adjust my behavior to come into line with something a little more reasonable? And that's fine. But like I said, what do you do with all the stupid people? Kill them off? Well, then you've got rid of all the dummies. Well, there you go. The ends justify the means. Or is it not rather more important to... For a second, I thought she was going to tell me something was wrong. Isn't it more important, rather, that we should engage with people who do stupid things? You know, shouldn't somebody maybe give me a piece of advice? Patiently instruct me? That's how we should deal with it. That's what you do. You deal with stupidity by patiently and lovingly explaining. And if you need to explain again, you do it again. That's how I, you know, like when my children all come into this world really stupid. They can't talk. They start off, they can't walk. I mean, but they don't know anything. What do you do? Say, oh, well, this kid doesn't know anything. To hell with him. You don't, but some people do, actually. So they expect children to know things that they themselves have never learned, and things they themselves never taught them. Wisdom is justified of her children. Something is proven wise based on the outcomes it brings about. How does that relate to what he just said, though? Well, you know, we played a game and you wouldn't play. And he was saying, basically, I'm going to play a better game. what I'm doing makes more sense than what you're doing. You know? And so therefore, you know, the outcome he brought about would prove wiser than the outcome they brought about. That's what he's suggesting. Like the way the game that John the Baptist and Jesus were playing. When I say playing game, it's like, don't take that at all pejorative. Because, you know, I'm not going to play your game means I'm not going to do things according to your rules. I'm not going to, you know, to engage in the little structure you've built, like for rules and all that. Jesus had his own set of rules, and I want to play by them. You can play the Jesus game, or you can play the Pharisee game. You know what I mean? John the Baptist was also playing a game. And not in a light sense. But he had this set of rules and an idea, an ideal, a goal. You know, all those ideas, like a goal, rules, how you act, it's all part of playing a game, part of game theory. Which I'm not an expert on, but that's what he's alluding to here. Is, you know, and someone who is well versed in game theory would understand what Jesus is talking about. And we can understand it too, because we understand about games. But when I say, sometimes it's used pejoratively, like, I'm not going to play your game. What do you think? This is a game? That has to do with the lightness with which things are taken. But it is like a game. Everything, you know, life is a lot like that. So we're halfway through the study. Promo. Subscribe to Line by Line Bible Studies. Click on the like button. There's my webpage. Hundreds of studies, hundreds of hours. And maybe hundreds of studies. I don't know. I've never counted them. Nah. Well, maybe close to 100 studies. Close to 100 Bible songs. Because of the way I'm already over 60 on this channel. But because of the way I organize things in the past. Favoring longer studies rather than breaking them into an arbitrary time of like an hour or whatever. If you have a question, send it to that. I haven't checked that this week. I will check. If you have a question right now, put it in the chat, but I'm not going to check the chat today till after the study. Well, no, I'm not. I'm going to check it later. So if you have a question in there about the study, I will address it tomorrow. If you want to suggest a topical study or something, just put it in the comments section. Not the comments, whatever. Put it in the email, blah, 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 whatever. Let's get back to the study. Verse 20, Then began he to upbraid the cities wherein most of his mighty works were done, because they repented not. Woe unto thee, Chorazin! Woe unto thee, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. But I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon at the day of judgment than for you. And thou, Capernaum, which are exalted into heaven, shalt be brought down to hell. For if the mighty works which had been done in thee had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. But I say unto you that it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment than for thee. At that time Jesus answered and said, I thank thee, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because thou hast hid these things from the wise and prudent, and hast revealed them unto babes. Even so, Father, for so it seemed good in thy sight. That's probably some point at which we'll break. So, woe unto you, Capernaum. Woe unto you, Bethsaida. He said he was upbraiding, chastising, verbally, taking to task the cities wherein most of his mighty works were done, because they repented not. I mean, they didn't wholesale go after him. They were listening to the Pharisees. Look at this man is a winebibber. He's talking to sinners. He's eating with publicans. And that may be something he did once. You know what I'm saying? You don't need to do anything more than once to just acquire a reputation. You go to one publican's house, you eat with one publican, and pretty soon you're the guy who eats with publicans all the time and abuses his children and blah, 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 blah. There's no end to the way people will make up rumors about you based on one tiny kernel of truth that is distorted out of proportion. That is magnified today in many ways. I mean, you think about social media and the internet, the way people's lives can be literally, well, not literally, but at least they can be destroyed socially. Like, you can be socially destroyed so you have no further place in the social world. You can't be a public figure. You got to retreat to just, my life, out in the middle of nowhere. Nobody cares about you. And, well, that's I like it that way. In a sense, if I have to be dragged out of this, I'll be dragged out kicking and screaming. Yeah, it's not totally true. But I enjoy it. I enjoy anonymity. It's fun being nobody. People are always trying to be somebody, and sometimes I can't help thinking it's a bit overrated. And Jesus was somebody. He wasn't trying to be somebody. And he was doing all these miracles. And people, in spite of it, they were like, it's the power of the devil. They would look at it and say, that's the power of the devil right there. Casting out devils. Healing sicknesses. See, that's devilry. He has access to, he can cleanse evil because he is evil. Evil casts out evil. Catch a thief. It takes a thief to catch a thief. And we have these ideas, right? If you're predisposed to dislike someone because they won't play your game, it's so easy to, you can, in the face of all kinds of evidence, you can become hardened and refuse to make what should be an easy decision, what you would think is an easy decision. We would say, like, well, if Jesus would do a few miracles for me, I'd totally believe in it. I'm not convinced that that's true. In a sense, we all have a miracle in front of us every day, but we fail to appreciate it. Like the world, the thing you're looking out of your skull at is a miracle. You're just like, yeah, it's there, it's the way, because of the rules of the game. It's just all there. Because, well, if it wasn't, it wouldn't be, isn't that the case? And so it is, and there's no implication to that. There's nothing suggestive about it. It's just, it just happens to be. So, people are not very mindful of I mean, many people are. Many people are just like, wow, it's amazing. Of course, of course. Of course the Lord. Of course there's a God. And I love those people. I wish I could have been one of them. It'd make my life so much simpler. But there's a blessing in being skeptical. But, if you follow it down its natural trajectory of skepticism, you get to the point where you got to be skeptical of skepticism, because at some point you realize it's like, well, the only thing I really know is that I'm staring out of my skull and experiencing something rather than nothing, and that's not very. It's like that only informs a very small portion of our existence. Like, really, that's all you can know for certain. Is that right now you're experiencing something rather than nothing. That is a certainty. I mean, everything else you see, it could be a dream, it could be an illusion, it could be, a simulation. There's a simulated universe. Like, this isn't real. It's all a computer simulation. Like the Matrix and stuff like that. Like, you can't know for sure. What you're observing is just, we're talking about probability. We're talking about degrees of probability and degrees of certainty. That's why when I talk about assurance of salvation, I did a study called Justifiable Confidence of Salvation, and I think it's actually a great study. But I do think it's a great study because people say, well, believing in God is all about faith, and they, but we believe in facts, and it's like, but the basis of all your facts is based on faith. It's underpinning it, because you gotta have faith that, science is based on the assumption that we all share the same objective experience. But what if God turns my mind onto interdimensional reality, like and to a person, a scientist, they might say your brain is malfunctioning. That stuff isn't real that you're seeing, but maybe I am seeing real things. Maybe I'm seeing through the veil. How do you know for certain? So, well, because it's different from everybody else. How do you know everyone else isn't just limited? And that definitely is a question you can't definitively answer. So, nobody is completely skeptical. They say, we're going to be skeptical, we're going to be rational. At the heart of it, human beings are irrational. And that's fine. Irrational is not, they lambast it. But on some level, you got to go with your gut. And on some level, your gut's going to mislead you. So you have to figure it out. Yeah, you try to apply rationality to the irrational, but ultimately these are irrational questions. Good and evil, wicked. You cannot determine wickedness through rational things. Like, the idea of evil is not going to be delineated through a rational set of propositions. And okay, now back to what Jesus said. Oh gosh, this is the study where I am like ready for it to be over. I've got another 20 minutes to cover. Let's see. Yep, exactly 20 minutes. Lord Jesus, help me. Oh, I'm whatever. It's a subject I do love, though. Chorazin, hey, if the works that were done in you were done in Tyre and Sidon. Tyre was a city, forgive me, fellow historians, but was it not Alexander the Great who took the stones and built the causeway out to the city that was in the sea? But I don't recall precisely, but I do know that Tyre and Sidon were destroyed. Right? There was a notable destruction of literally the stones of the city. It was out on a rock in the ocean or offshore in the sea. And so a very defensible place. Unless you have it's very hard. I mean, imagine in ancient times getting on boats and trying to take a city that was built on a rock in the ocean. And they've got their gates closed, and you've got a boat, and you're Alexander the Great, and you don't have a lot of, and if it's not Alexander, someone can say so. I'll look it up later, or maybe not. I don't know. You can look it up and say you were wrong, but it's not like I was sitting here in all confidence. I know it was the Greeks, anyways. It was Alexander, sure. Whatever. But they built a causeway out to the thing, and they destroyed the city. Sodom, obviously a famous story. The city of homosexual rapists. A lot of times people think it's about homosexuality, but actually it's about homosexual rapists. Now, I'm certain, like calling, I'll just say it, cover your children's ears, anal sex, calling that sodomy is a bit of a stretch. Now, I'm not a big apologist for it, whatever, about what people do with their body parts. Okay. But to forcibly do that to someone against their will is definitely bad, right? I don't know anyone gay. I was going to say all my gay friends. I was like, I don't have any gay friends. I live in the middle of nowhere. Outside my window is a cornfield. That's it. There's you know what I mean? It's like, I don't have neighbors. I don't have friends. I have friends. But I don't know if they're gay. They're probably not, because we're all rural out here. And I've seen gay people in the grocery store. I mean, you can just tell. Because they, it's just like you can just tell. Either that or they're just really effeminate or, but you can't tell them all, right? You can't tell them all. But I'm sure they would all agree that raping someone is wrong. Homosexual rape is definitely every bit as bad as regular rape. In fact, there was a similar story about regular rape in, I forgot, the Book of Judges. Similar to Sodom and Gomorrah, but a bit different. So, it's about rape. Sodom and Gomorrah. And homosexual rape. So it was corrupt. Not only they were rapists, it was to make it seem, because they were also going against that which is natural. And for me, for my money, rape is unnatural. Because I couldn't imagine doing something against someone's will, how that would be. And the risk of getting whatever. It's like I always told my wife, I was like, I want you to enjoy your time with me. And the people who are think that kicking and screaming partners are arousing, it's insane for my money. I mean, it's like, who wants someone? I don't get it. All right, let's just suffice it to say, I don't get it. I literally could not be part of that crowd. I couldn't play that game. Bring the men out that we may know them. I'd be like, hi, how you doing? It's really nice to meet you. I'm like, the euphemistic use of that, it's Sodom, it's just out of bounds. Well, look at this verse. It shall be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon in the day of judgment. When Jesus talks about these things, I mean, to me, it's like more tolerable. He could be now, like I said, there are different ways of interpreting things, okay? And not all of those ways are valid, okay? So sometimes I make an interpretation, and it might not be valid. There will be truth in it, but it may not be applicable to that particular verse. And one of those is, I think this, when I talk about this, I say, well, wait a second, take this literally. And my fundamentalist friends, I'm not saying it's literal. I'm saying, like, well, let's look at it literally. It'll be literally more tolerable for Sodom or for Tyre and Sidon in the day of judgment than for these cities that were minding their own business but otherwise didn't receive Jesus because they couldn't. Because the mighty works, they saw miracles and they did not repent. They said if Sodom saw that, which they did not, it would have been more tolerable in the day of judgment. Did I cover this in my, have you heard of Jesus, the pregnant woman killer? Did I cover that? I should have, I thought. Basically the idea that, no, I didn't cover it. I think I was talking with someone, and I said, I'm like, look at, there's Sodom and Gomorrah. And there was no warning. The angels came, the men wanted to rape them, and then they said, we're going to burn it down. And they left, and then they burned it down. They didn't go around the city going like, repent for the kingdom. Look at here, a miracle. The men were all blinded. That caused them to fumble about and be enraged. But if different other mighty works have been done in Sodom, they could have gone, the angels could have gone at it a bit different to save Sodom rather than to destroy it. Because of the way in which, when the angels go to Sodom, there's a way in which you could look at that as a setup. They go in there, and what are they looking like? They're looking like attractive young men that sodomites might like to sodomize. They look pleasant to the eye. They take on an appearance. They could have gone in as looking like ugly old hags, ugly old men, ugly old women, whatever. They could have taken on the appearance that the men of Sodom would just have looked like at them and said, not interested, right? And then they could have come in and started doing miracles and persuading people to turn from their wickedness, and they would have been like, look at this is God's work. And Jesus is saying they would have. They would have repented if they had seen these things done. Maybe so, because in a sense, that only someone obsessed with religion could disregard something good like that. You'd have to be obsessed with the idea that you are already righteous, with you are a servant of God, to be able to just have a miracle come along and just be like, that's not of God, that's of the devil. In Sodom and Gomorrah, they were doing the devil's work. They were sodomizing people. Or they were the kind of people who were willing to sodomize strangers. They were willing to rape other men who wandered into their city. And but in that, sometimes just like when Jesus preached to publicans and sinners, they that are whole need not a physician. People who are broken understand sometimes that, like, they know they're not right. Their consciences are bearing witness against them if they have a conscience, and most people do. But not all, granted. Well, they have a conscience, but not all are affected by it. Not all are moved by concern about conscience. They know what they do is wrong. It is very infrequent that people like they talk about insanity as a defense. It's very rare that someone can be effectively defended by the thought of insanity, because it's to prove that they didn't know what they were doing was wrong. Like, that's the bar you have to do, is you prove that they don't know, they couldn't tell the difference between right and wrong when they did what they did. So they were insane. They were not grounded in reality and the knowledge of right and wrong. But that's very difficult to prove. And in Sodom and Gomorrah, they would have known what they did was wrong, but they were doing it anyways. But then something powerful, something miraculous comes along. They would have repented, according to Jesus. We're just taking this literally. I mean, I think that what he's really talking about is, like, he's just saying that it's remarkable that they didn't receive him in spite of all these works he did. I don't know that he's necessarily literally saying, but he is saying literally that your offense is greater. I mean, the offense of not listening to me is greater than the offense of threatening to rape a couple angels. Angel rape is nothing compared to the way you addressed Jesus coming into your city. That's what he's saying. That it's that comparison. But the idea that it would be more tolerable in the day of judgment, well, wait a second. Aren't they all going to be tormented eternally? How can there be any real difference in that? Aren't they going to be or separated from God for all eternity into the blackness of darkness forever, but conscious? I think the blackness of darkness forever is unconsciousness forever. I believe in death. And I'm not going to belabor that point. I don't think that people who believe in hell are not Christians or something like that. I just think you're wrong in taking the idea of hell literally. Of literal eternal torment in hell is not right. Not the way to look at passages that make that sort of idea into something that we could think about. Though death is very real, and that's what I think hell is. Now, interestingly, there's a reference to hell in 11:23 here, and that word is Hades. And like I said, that when Jesus, almost every time he refers to heaven and hell in the same context, he's talking about the grave. Hell as the subterranean world under the earth, literally, where you go under the earth where you're buried. That is, in mythology, hell is pictured as being under the earth and the fire and the lava and all that, because that's what's under there. There's lava down there. It's kind of creepy when you think about it. Like, you dig down, and then there's dirt, there's gravel, there's rock, and there's water. But if you keep going, you get into hot. You get into molten rock. The earth has a molten core. That's just amazing. I mean, when I think about it, I'm like, that's... Like, the thought that I'm standing on this little skin over this molten core is just mind-bending. But anyways, so, hell is Hades in Greek, which answers to Sheol from the Hebrew. It's translated... when you translate Sheol into Greek, you use Hades, or they did. When Jesus talked about hell, like in chapter 7 or chapter 5 of the Sermon on the Mount of this book, like when he talked about it's better to have to go to that one of your members should perish than that you should have two hands and be cast into the fire of hell. He referred to Gehenna, which is a literal place where they burned garbage all the time outside of Jerusalem. And that is a more perfect analogy for the thing we call the lake of fire from the book of Revelation. Whereas this idea of Hades and Sheol refers to what happens when you die. Now, people have conflated the idea of when you die, you go to judgment with the lake of fire itself, so that they think that death, that when it refers to Hades, hell, that is the place of fire. Even though that is a place of fire, at least according to legend and according to tradition. But I think Jesus splits that off, even though he talks about being tormented in this flame in Hades in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. But in that parable, he draws heavily on the tradition of the Pharisees. And so I do not think that was meant to be taken literally. But if you take this literally, then you have a problem, because, well, according to that, Sodom is going to have a more tolerable time than Capernaum will have a tolerable time. So the people who rejected Jesus will be able to tolerate their torment in the day of judgment. It'll be tolerable. They will have some form of toleration. They will have some form of mercy. Because tolerable implies that. If, I've been saying this, and I'm going to go. Oh, hold on. Okay. I just want to see what that word tolerable translates out to. I don't know if I've ever looked it up, and I've talked about it many times. Have I looked it up? Maybe I didn't determine it was exactly what it appears to be. I hope. Like I said, this is the sausage factory. You're seeing, the way sausage is made is not always the most tasteful thing. Yeah. I'm looking at it on the Bible Hub, and the definition they give is the Greek word anekato. Anektoteros. Anektoteros. Toteros. All right. Anektoteros. And the definition of that word, according to this, is more tolerable. So there's no help there. I mean, I could research it further, but the hell is always portrayed as this unbearable suffering, unbearable pain, intolerable. But here's the thing, unbearable. The idea of unbearable suffering is itself an hyperbole. You know what I mean? Because I have watched people bear unbearable suffering. I have watched people tolerate the intolerable. Because if you cannot bear the suffering, literally, you fall to pieces. You die. So that was pain that was unbearable. Really? How so? He died. You're right. That was unbearable. He could not bear it. He couldn't. That was intolerable. Well, how do you know? Well, he didn't tolerate it. How so? He evaporated. Like I'm putting pressure on something. I'm putting, I'm pushing against the tolerance of something that, like I'm literally just using this. I'm thinking mechanically, like I got a car. I'm just pushing. And it's trying to tolerate it. It's trying to hold back, but if it breaks, it couldn't take it. Couldn't take it. That's what it means to be intolerable. That's what it means to be, things break. And that's the problem with the idea of hell. Is that, well, either they can take it or they can't. If they can take it, then it's tolerable. Then they endure it, and they survive. That the very idea, like, that goes into what the way people talk about hell. If I want to talk to you seriously about it, it's it doesn't make sense literally on a logical level. It has to be somehow tolerable. And Jesus said it would be more tolerable for some and less tolerable for others. And what the heck does that mean if you take that on the surface of it? What does that say about hell? What it says is that punishment is limited. At least as far as like punishment that you have to experience. The only way you make something intolerable is you kill them. You make it, you can cause them to suffer, and that can be more or less tolerable. And then you end the suffering by killing them, and then you could say that their punishment is everlasting. But if someone, like, you know, it's like I've seen, and on my channel I got a video, a recommended video, the girl who lives in a bucket. And this little girl lives in a bucket. Well, she was 19 when she died a couple of years ago. And you think, well, you know, having no arms and no legs and no torso, and being basically a head on a little tiny baby body, that would be torture and life not worth living. But she didn't think so. You know, and if you had to live without, if you were just a head on a stick, you'd find a way to make the most out of existence, as thousands of paralyzed people do, and God bless them. You know, it's like that. They don't. You know, I might think like, oh, if I couldn't use my arms and my legs, I wish I was dead, and that would definitely cross my mind if I lost the use. You know, God forbid. I'm so used to being mobile. I'm so used to being able. But to degrade someone else or to say like, oh no, their life isn't worth living, I just don't understand. So anyways, I think that the human beings are resilient. And you put them in a lake of fire, if you don't die, you're going to get used to the pain. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, we're going to keep like, this isn't fairy tale. Well, I know to some people it is. Well, don't make it. The fairy tale aspect of it is metaphorical. It's meant to indicate the severity of things. You know, it's my 3-year-old. Anyways, so we'll pick up on the next part next time. We've covered our full hour. I'm really wore out, so I'll be back tomorrow. So thank you for joining me in this study. I look forward to studying with you again soon, and that means tomorrow. Hopefully at the right time. So, and it won't be tomorrow's Saturday. So, all right, let's just bring up some music. Hopefully it won't loop endlessly. There we go.
Behold the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns. Yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are not ye much better than they? Which of you but take